money. It comes in bits of paper or just digits on a screen. Money is artificial, a human invention. It's only worth what we all think it is. And yet, money reveals something about ourselves. How we spend it shows what we value. Before you can spend on your wants, you have to pay for your needs. California's wildfire crisis needs a lot of money all at once to pay for firefights, to repair the damage, but also to try to reduce the danger going forward. Money is our final element. We can spend it wisely now, or this crisis will cost us more money and more lives in the long run. When a megafire makes a run for a town, there's no time to worry about who sparked the fire.
It's dark, smoke, everybody's hysterical, trying to get out. Gas pump lines are down the street.
The campfire destroyed Paradise and the surrounding neighborhoods of Concow and Magalia so quickly that most of the 85 people who died didn't even make it outside of their homes. Some people died in their cars, trying to escape Paradise. Robin Souza was driving the opposite way.
At that time, I was on my way up.
She'd just made it to work that morning when the fire started.
I was going to come up and try and get a few things.
Her husband was up at the house in Magalia.
He called me intermittently a couple of times, but it got worse and worse. There was propane tanks exploding around him. The windows were breaking in our house. And so I said, just get out.
Robin had to turn around and run for her life.
We kind of said goodbye to each other at that point. I didn't think I was going to get out. He didn't think he was going to get out because it was just so intense.
Jammed roads made the escape painfully slow. For many survivors, it was the longest day of their lives. But the aftermath is longer still and stressful.
It was home. It was where we wanted to be.
Robin and her husband lost the home they spent years fixing up for their retirement.
Yeah, 15 years. It was a nice, cozy house. We loved it. It wasn't real big, it wasn't real fancy, but it sure was home.
Some survivors plan to move back to Paradise, but many, like Robin, don't. It'll simply take too long. She plans to build her new home elsewhere. In Paradise today, there are some signs of life, but very few people actually live here yet. It's still very much a cleanup job.
Very, very difficult. Yeah, that was our community.
You can't really put a price on the death of a community, much less on the deaths of the 85 people who died in that fire. Megafires like the campfire end up costing all of us. The whole country pays for firefighting and FEMA relief. Home insurance rates go up for everyone in the state. Sometimes there's no one to hold responsible. Survivors and their insurance policies have to cover the cost of the damage. But the people who survived the campfire do have someone they blame.
When PG&E says we have a risk tolerance or we're assuming a risk, they're not assuming the risk. The public's assuming the risk.
Steve Campora is part of a cottage profession of lawyers in California who do nothing but sue PG&E for a living. They've had a lot of clients. Those lawyers point out we know plenty already about the high-tension line that started the campfire.
When that fails, the jumper line swings into the tower. You're going to automatically have a fire. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it with 115,000 volts.
Since the fire, PG&E said it found more than a dozen other immediate safety problems on this line. It's so bad, the company says it shut down this power line permanently. The lawyers suing PG&E think they can prove the company was negligent.
If it wore enough to break the hook for it to come down, that took a long time. And the question would be, why didn't they find it? If they did an inspection of it and didn't find it, that means they didn't do a very good inspection.
PG&E says it believes it will be financially responsible for causing the campfire. The damage from this fire and others blamed on the company is so expensive, PG&E said it could go out of business. We journalists don't always give you enough numbers, and there's a reason for that. Too many numbers can make you gloss over, but also it's really hard to keep big numbers in perspective. Let me show you what I mean. PG&E thinks the damage from the wildfires that started in 2017 and 2018 will cost it about $30 billion. You can't imagine having that much cash. I can't either. Even PG&E doesn't have that much money. So here's another way to look at it. California's got roughly 40 million people, which means this $30 billion is $750 per man, woman, and child in the state of California. A family of 4 would have to cut PG&E a $3,000 check to cover that. I'll tell you all this because we're gonna talk numbers, and you deserve to understand what they mean. So keep in mind, every 40 million bucks of this crisis is the same amount as $1 from every Californian. But I'm also telling you this because that $30 billion is gonna have to come from somewhere. And one way or another, it's going to come from a lot of us. So PG&E filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection.
PG&E's bankruptcy filing is a scam. It's a scam to divert attention away from accountability.
Customer advocate Mark Toney points out there's a reason they call it protection.
Most companies do everything they can to avoid bankruptcy. PG&E is doing everything it can to file for bankruptcy. It makes no sense.
Over the course of months, PG&E declined repeated requests to be interviewed for this series to tell its side of the story. Its critics accuse PG&E of using the bankruptcy as a pressure tactic to create political urgency around the need to fix the company's finances and to get out of paying as much to fire survivors. The critics argue from a PR perspective, it worked.
The day that PG&E filed the notice for bankruptcy, every news story shifted from being about wildfires to being about bankruptcy. Wildfires is now taking a back seat when really preventing wildfires should be at the top of the priorities right now.
Bankruptcy is a tool PG&E can use to try to negotiate down the cost of the damage so it can stay in business. PG&E says it could go under. Some argue maybe it should.
Right now, PG&E is in such disarray that no amount of money in the world is going to be enough to make the system safe with the current management. Someone else needs to run the grid in PG&E territory, whether that's new people at PG&E or a new utility company. I don't know, but something has to change.
Steve Weissman is a former PUC judge. He handled disputes about power companies, including PG&E.
I would expect that the company is now focusing on nothing else.
There's a judge at the regulator right now trying to decide whether PG&E should live or die as a company. There are monopolies like PG&E all over the country that never expire.
And in all the 100 years we've been doing things that way in this country, have we ever had to detangle something like a PG&E?
Not anything on this scale. Does it make sense to break up this company? And if so, how would you do that? I don't pretend to know the answer. Nobody knows the answer to that right now in a studied kind of way. But I think it's critically important to be asking those questions now.
So, if PG&E dies, who would you pay your power bill to? It could be reborn as a new company or split itself into smaller companies. In the Power episode, we told you that a government takeover is unlikely, but it's not impossible. PG&E could become hundreds of very small city-owned electric companies or 1 or 2 giant state-run companies.
Say the state's done, and they just decide, we're done with you, we're going to do something completely different. Yeah. How can they do that? I mean, because PG&E owns all the lines, right?
Yes, and the state is going to have to compensate PG&E for taking over all of that equipment.
The government has a power called Eminent Domain. They can take your property, but they've got to pay you for it. PG&E thinks its whole system is worth $70 billion. That's $1,750 per man, woman, and child in California. The price is negotiable, but still, that's steep. Steve says a government utility wouldn't need to make a profit, so the bills would go down eventually.
But since the state would start out with a massive bill to pay for all the equipment that it's purchased from PG&E, it's going to have to play out over probably decades to get to a point where you really have lower rates as a result of that transaction.
On top of that, if the old PG&E power grid starts a new fire and the government owns it, the cost would have to be passed on to taxpayers. Passing on the cost is another tactic PG&E is trying to use to save itself from the cost of the damage of its wildfires.
The problem with it is they're not gambling with their money, they're gambling with our money. They're gambling with the public's lives and property.
The house is burned down. Friends, family. You just take what you can and leave.
In the span of 1 week, the week of October 8th, 2017, CAL FIRE blamed PG&E equipment for starting 17 wildfires that killed 22 people and burned down more than 2,500 homes. The Cascade Fire in Yuba County killed 4 of those people. It burned down 250 homes. CAL FIRE says 2 sagging power lines slapped together. Almost all of the other fires were caused by trees hitting power lines. Even the people who saved their own homes felt homeless after seeing the rest of the community destroyed.
It's where I grew up. It's my home. I mean, I could live somewhere else, but it's not going to feel like home. Home is a special place, a place you have memories. And when you move away, you have to make all those new memories over again. It's just not fair to be pushed out of a place by fire.
PG&E has permission under our laws right now to ask regulators to pass the cost of that damage to you, PG&E customers, on your monthly bills. The state legislature passed SB 901, and Governor Jerry Brown signed it into law, just a month and a half before the campfire started. Your elected leaders here are working on new laws again, some of which could really benefit utility companies like PG&E. So this seems like a good time to check on the $4 million that PG&E spent after it was convicted to help elect those people. We already know that Governor Gavin Newsom wouldn't say whether he'd give back the money he got. PG&E was convicted of 6 federal felonies in 2016. After that, you took more than $200,000 to help get elected. How should people trust you to be running the show to come up with the solutions?
I wish you luck with whatever you're working on, but that's a strange question.
But what about the 98 state lawmakers from both parties who also got the money? We asked all 98 of them if it was right to take that money and would they give it back. One told us he gave back part of his PG&E money before we asked. Another donated all of his PG&E money to charity before our questions. And after we came asking about PG&E's felonies, the number of additional lawmakers to tell us they would give up the money was 1. Senator Anthony Portantino, Democrat from Glendale. He donated all $4,000 of his PG&E money to Recovery for Butte County schools, some of which burned down in the campfire. Portantino wrote us, "Thank you for bringing this issue to my attention. I completely regret and apologize for this circumstance." All of this means that instead of 82% of your legislature keeping the money they got from a corporate felon, the number is now 80%, who either think it's okay or can't be bothered to say otherwise. In this same time, while a federal offender, PG&E spent almost $12 million lobbying the state government, and another $14 million to lobby Congress in Washington, D.C. So what if all their political spending works? What if PG&E is allowed to pass along the cost of all the wildfire damage, including the campfire, to you on your bill? To cover the $30 billion, you would have to bill every PG&E power customer $5,500. PG&E knows it can't just up and bill you $5,000. Just like a good car salesman, they won't make it about the price of the car. They'll make it about how much you can afford every month. PG&E could borrow $30 billion to pay fire victims and make you, the customers, pay it back. Add $15 in principal to every month's PG&E bill, another $15 or so in interest. That's $30 a month, every month, for 30 years. The total cost with interest to every PG&E power customer would be more than $10,000, paid in monthly installments over 3 decades. Meantime, the regulators are poised to let PG&E pass on the cost of the work it needs to make the power grid safer.
We are going to approve more money to all the electric utilities because the world has changed and they're going to have to step up their game.
You might have to pay for this on your power bill, even though the judge handling PG&E's felony case blames the company. Again, federal courts ban cameras, but I heard the judge say a lot of money went out in dividends that should have gone to the tree budget. This is a problem of your own making.
You can't say we're making this decision not to spend the money, but oh, by the way, safety is our number one priority. If safety is your number one priority, spend the money.
The judge said that too. I heard him say safety is not your number one thing. After Paradise burned down, PG&E promised to put all the power lines in town underground when it rebuilds. Undergrounding the power lines could be part of the solution, but not everywhere. We spend a lot on that already, and
At the current funding rate, it would probably take in excess of 100 years to get all of the existing lines above ground undergrounded.
meantime, PG&E is under court orders to plan to do more power shutoffs. The average shutoff lasts 3 days. Shutoffs will knock out power even to cities that aren't anywhere near a forest. PG&E had a shutoff plan for fire safety before the Camp Fire, but it didn't include high-tension lines like the one that burned Paradise down. That plan includes those now, but it's still up to PG&E to decide when to turn the power off.
How much faith do you have in the shutoff plans they've made?
I think the power safety shutoff program it's growing.
PG&E hired under court order many more people to go cut the trees near its power lines, and it says it's inspected thousands of miles of its power grid with plans to use high-tech methods to keep inspecting them. The court-ordered monitor is supposed to do spot inspections of PG&E's work while it's on probation, but we don't know how much of what the monitor finds will ever be made public so that we can see the results. The decisions made now by those we elected to power will decide who pays for wildfires and how much for years to come. And the costs are getting out of control.
The good old days, and now the new normal. The jaw-dropping costs, you can see the graph here, 25 billion a year in related costs of these wildfires. So who the heck's gonna pay for that? Everybody wants someone else to pay for it.
You might be wondering, power companies are big businesses. Don't they take out insurance to cover accidents like wildfires? They do, but they can't buy $30 billion of it to cover as much damage as we're talking about now. Companies like PG&E can't just go buy all the insurance they want. The insurance industry actually sets a limit of about $1.5 billion. Doesn't matter how big of a company you are, $1.5 billion is the most insurance money can buy. But the cost just to scrape away the debris from the Camp Fire is $2 billion, according to the state's estimate. This is why California utilities are about to become uninsurable. That gets us to our next cost, covering future fires. If the insurance industry can't cover our power companies, guess who's thinking about being their new insurance broker? Your state government. That's who. There couldn't possibly be a worse time for the taxpayers to get into the business of insuring California electric companies, but the powers that be can throw this question right back at you. Do you want the lights to come on or not?
We're all in this together.
In the future, when power companies spark more fires, some state leaders argue we should spread the cost to more people, not just the customers of the utility that started it. They want to pool money from all over California.
We all have a burden and responsibility to assume the costs.
PG&E's critics actually like that idea.
A California Catastrophic Wildfire Fund, patterned off the Florida Catastrophic Hurricane Fund, that would treat all wildfire victims with equity.
Mark Toney, the customer advocate, argues that the fund should cover all wildfire damage, whether caused by utilities or not.
The people in Redding are no less deserving than the people in any of the other fires.
Lawmakers are debating starting at least one big wildfire fund. There could be one for utilities and another for fire victims. Pay attention to the little details. Who can get paid from the fund? Who pays into the fund and how? What will the fund cover? How much money? Those decisions all need to be made, and each decision comes with a cost to somebody. At a time when the cost of living is a crisis all its own in California, the wildfire crisis is going to make it worse. Homeowners insurance is going up for all of us, even a small increase in urban cities away from the forests. Landlords are going to pass those costs on to renters. For people in and around the forest, home insurance policies are going up by more than double the cost. Some people are getting canceled and have to use the FAIR plan, a watered-down insurance plan of last resort for people who can't find coverage on the open market. Everything about our response to the wildfire crisis smolders down to this.
There's not enough money in the state of California to continue to do this year after year. To have these kinds of $10, $15 billion hits occur year after year, that kind of funding doesn't exist.
It's the one part where everyone agrees.
So we need to do something else.
We're in real trouble right now. It's not just about turning on your lights. It's not just about paying your electric bills. It's literally about the economy of the state.
We gotta stop wildfires. If we don't stop wildfires, nothing is going to matter. There just won't be enough money to pay for everything. We gotta stop these fires.
People really need to take this issue really seriously, that they're at much higher fire risk than I think than they imagine.
Remember, scientists studying our forests know that stopping fires got us into this mess.
We've known already for decades what we should be doing, and now we have to do it. I don't think we got a choice anymore, given where the climate's going, right, and given where fires are taking the forest.
To stop these fires, the megafires, they tell us, we need to burn and thin many more acres of our forests on our terms when it's safe. Up at Lake Tahoe, Forest Service ecologist Hugh Safford showed you the results of that thinning. When the Angora fire came, the thinned forest survived. But the untreated forest, the one we caused to be overgrown by clean-cut logging and fighting every fire that started for 150 years, it died. Flying embers from that dying forest took hundreds of homes with it. The same thing that happened in Paradise, Embercast. If you had treated all these square miles where there is no forest now to some condition like this, would that Embercast problem have been the same, or might more of these houses made it?
Chances are that more homes would have made it. The more tall objects you have in a burning forest, the more sources there are for embers, right? So if you thin the forest, you have fewer sources for embers.
In the long run, nothing is going to buy down the danger as much as fuel reduction. The cost of treating 1 acre of forest runs between $500 and $2,000 an acre, depending on the type of terrain and the type of treatment. If California needs to do 1 million acres a year to keep our forests healthy, that means we're looking at a cost of $500 million to $2 billion a year. That is a lot to spend on landscaping, but it's a steal when you consider that megafires can now cost us $10, $15, $20 billion in a single fire. Governor Newsom's proposed first budget is in the ballpark, $225 million for fuel reduction.
We need to get to 500,000 acres. We're about halfway there.
But remember, Half of this problem is on federal land.
We're giving billions and billions of dollars for forest fires in California. There's no reason for those fires to be like they are.
President Donald Trump routinely portrays this as California's problem, but it's not. The federal government he runs owns roughly half the forest that needs to be treated. I've talked to countless people in the U.S. Forest Service in my career, and all of them want to do more to help. But they're only allowed to do as much as Congress gives them the money to do.
To this point in time, Congress hasn't seen fit to subsidize that work to any really great extent.
Cutting and burning the forest to reduce fuels isn't pretty, but the results can be. Part of the pitch to thin fuels on this highway downhill from Lake Tahoe was to make the views prettier. Firefighters like to say they're making it look like a park. This particular project was done by loggers. By selling some of the trees to loggers, but requiring them to leave the biggest ones alone, the Forest Service is able to pay for more of this work to get done without costing the taxpayers.
We decimated our forest product industry in California in the late 70s.
Both of the last two CAL FIRE chiefs told me we need more logging to pay for all the work that needs done. Some of the smaller material ripped out of the forest can be burned for power in biomass power plants like this one near Sacramento. A giant building uses ions to clean out almost all the pollution from the smoke, but it's not as cheap as solar, and without subsidies of some kind, these plants are shutting down. And all of it can be a tough sell. Thinning the forest isn't enough on its own. It won't save every house.
The scary thing is that we're having communities burn down now, right? People who didn't even think they were at any fire risk. That's an urban fire problem, right? The fire may have come from the forest originally, but once it gets into the town, it's the town that's driving the fire and not the forest any longer.
We have to fix our communities, especially the ones within a mile or two of the forest.
I think a lot of people living in these small communities in the Sierra Nevada feel that if they're 2 or 3 or 4 blocks away from the actual interface with the forest that they're safe, and they're not.
Dangerous conditions, trees touching houses, wood piled against walls, pine needles on roofs, all can catch embers and light houses on fire more than a mile from the forest. That's on you if you live there. The good news is, pretty much anywhere you live in the state, you can get a free inspection.
You just need to go to your local fire department. Yeah.
Start there.
Yeah, start there.
Hugh made a great point about this. A lot of the decisions about fire safety happen at the local level. While you're talking to your fire department, ask them how to get involved to influence those decisions. Volunteers from local fire safe councils actively help to decide how to prioritize the money we do have for forest safety. And even if you don't live there, this affects you. We pay a lot of attention to losing homes, but we're also losing forests. Think back to basic science class. Plants breathe carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. Trees take carbon out of the air. They store carbon that might otherwise warm the planet. But
to keep this carbon on site, you had to remove carbon.
When trees burn, the carbon goes back into our atmosphere, contributing to climate change. And again, after this fire, the only forest left is the one where we cut and burned some of it in advance.
As an ecologist, what I really worry about, which is the ability of forests to even be in the Sierra Nevada in the long term.
And for that to happen, they need to burn more.
Seems ironic, but it's definitely true.
Hugh says in the future, we need policies closer to what we showed you in Yosemite. We need to be able to let natural fires burn under safe conditions without being afraid of them, without putting them all out like we did for the last 150 years. Meantime, we simply need to survive. We need better evacuation plans at the town level and in each of our homes. And this raises a key point. Don't expect firefighters to save you. There's only so much they can do in a perfect storm. I was in Paradise. I saw it. We've talked to some people in those neighborhoods who are panicked, worried that they're not seeing the response they would have expected, wondering where the firefighters are. I understand what you're saying.
I'm just upset. I told everybody this was coming. All these houses are going to be gone, and they could have been saved.
The fact of the matter is this fire took off so quickly with high winds this morning and dry conditions that it just hasn't been possible to get structure protection crews to every home that needs saving. We now know those crews couldn't even get to every rescue call.
And we are surrounded in flames. We're on top of the hill and and we're surrounded. We need a helicopter or something.
They don't want to take my dogs, and I don't want to be around my dogs. Okay, well, ma'am, you need to save your own life.
They couldn't get to every person that needed saving. The fact is, no fire department can handle 18,000 structure fires all at once. That fire department does not exist.
Yeah, I think after the campfire, people need to look at that as a harbinger of what could come to their community. I'm not saying that every smoke is going to turn into a campfire.
CAL FIRE Chief Tom Porter says those of us who live around forest and brush need to get into a new mindset. He says, think in advance about what to do if the smoke is coming toward you with fast wind behind it.
Looking for opportunities to evacuate, not waiting for the warning.
Still, we could do a better job of warning people. We need to use the alert systems we've already got and to explore new methods.
Evacuation drill notification. This is an evacuation drill notification only.
This verbal neighborhood warning siren we showed you, the town of Mill Valley upgraded all 5 of its air raid sirens to these with satellite phones and battery backups for only about $500,000.
But that's cheaper than that, right?
Yes, it is. It is cheaper than a big fire truck.
For less than the price of one fire truck, they can tell people how to survive the day the big one comes. And lastly, we need to build smarter. A lot of this crisis needs attention from the halls of big government in DC and Sacramento. But you can do more than you think locally, in your city hall, in your county hall.
A lot of it comes down to planning. A lot of it is decisions getting made in city councils, city boards, planning departments.
Might be something you need to consider, because unfortunately we're becoming that lesson.
Paradise Town Councilman Mike Zuccolillo says no one ever talked about a whole town fire before. The plan didn't stand up to it. 85 people died.
She didn't want to die, and I knew it was bad. She didn't realize it was going to be bad. She was hiding in her house. I had said she'd probably be alive now.
The people who lost loved ones in Paradise have fears and regrets.
Wish I had done something different. I think about it every day, wishing I could just, reverse it all and do something different. Unless we all reverse course, unless we all do something different, California's burning crisis will claim more of our lives. We'll need to do the best we can with the 3 elements we've got: fire, power, money.